Good morning everyone on this Good Friday 2020. I'd like to share a few thoughts with you this morning about Peter, or Simon Peter. He was one of Jesus' first followers. He'd been part of the inner circle with Jesus for 3 years. He'd seen a lot. He'd seen the miracles of feeding and healing. He'd seen Jesus interact with the authorities and confront them. He'd been there at the walking on the water and the transfiguration, and he was the first to confess that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of God. He had been a very loyal follower and he knew Jesus really well. In Luke 22, there's a passage that tells us what happened when Jesus was at the Last Supper. This is what it says. "Simon, Simon," Jesus said, "Satan has asked to sift each of you like wheat. But I have pleaded in prayer for you, Simon, that your faith should not fail. So when you have repented and turned to me again, strengthen your brothers." Peter said, "Lord, I'm ready to go to prison with you and even to die with you." But Jesus said, "Peter, let me tell you something. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." Jesus knew Peter better than Peter knew himself, and hence his prayer that his faith wouldn't fail. And after Jesus is arrested, the Bible tells us that all his followers deserted him and ran away. And then we read in John 18 this passage. "Simon Peter followed Jesus, as did another of the disciples. That other disciple was acquainted with the high priest, so he was allowed to enter the high priest's courtyard with Jesus. Peter had to stay outside the gate. Then the disciple who knew the high priest spoke to the woman watching at the gate, and she let Peter in. The woman asked Peter, 'You're not one of that man's disciples, are you?' 'No,' he said, 'I'm not.' Because it was cold, the household servants and the guards had made a charcoal fire. They stood around it, warming themselves, and Peter stood with them, warming himself. Meanwhile, as Simon Peter was standing by the fire, they asked him again, 'You're not one of his disciples, are you?' He denied it, saying, 'No, I'm not.' But one of the household slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, 'Didn't I see you out there in the olive grove with Jesus?' Again Peter denied it, and immediately a rooster crowed. So here's Peter in the courtyard of the high priest with the guards and the locals who supported Jesus' arrest. He came under huge pressure from the questioning, and he cracked, denying his relationship with Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. It's pure speculation to ask why he did it. Perhaps he was fearful of the guards and what they might do to him. Perhaps he was disappointed that Jesus hadn't turned out to be the person he thought he was. Perhaps he just felt helpless and wanted to save his own skin. To have been there in the first place in the face of personal danger, he was there because he couldn't bear to let Jesus go to the high priest alone. He may have failed, but not because he was a coward, but because he was very brave. We know that that's not the end of the story of Peter. After the resurrection at the breakfast on the beach, Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus could see beneath the failure of Peter to the real Peter. He restored and forgave him, had such confidence in his potential to give him the responsibility for loving and supporting his followers and friends for the rest of his earthly life. So what can we learn from this story of Peter on this Good Friday in 2020? Firstly, Jesus knows us better than we know ourselves. He understands that we're all capable of inconsistencies, weaknesses, and bad choices. We're human, and we need God's grace and mercy and love on a daily basis, just as Peter did. Secondly, we need to be aware that although we may never be in situations of outright denial of being followers of Jesus, as Peter was, it may be that just by being silent and saying nothing, we're denying our relationship or commitment to him. And thirdly, if there are relationships within our family with friends or colleagues, or situations where we have been disloyal or let someone down, this Easter may be a time for taking the initiative and turning things round as far as we are able, and with God's help to restore and renew relationships.
Christ alone, my hope is found. He is my light, my strength, my song. This cornerstone, this solid ground, firm through the fiercest drought and storm. What heights of love, what depths of peace, when fears are stilled, when striving cease. My comforter, my all in all, here in the love of Christ I stand.
There in the ground his body lay, light of the world by darkness slain, then bursting forth in glorious day, up from the grave he rose again. And as he stands in victory, sin's curse has lost its grip on me, for I am his, and he is mine, bought with the precious blood of Christ. No guilt in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me. From life's first cry to final breath, Jesus commands my destiny. No power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck me from his hand, till he returns or calls me home. Here in the power of Christ I'll stand. Here in the power of Christ I'll stand.